we have here? Okay, looks like we have Glenisa, Roman, Martin. And we have so far, looks like 8 folks from the public.
Bradley Glass.
Okay. Hang on.
Wow,
We
I
got
don't
a
get
few
more
minutes.
going introducing me when I start. What's up with that?
Hey, I just wanted to let you know I've been thinking about that, you know, Smacky South song. And I read Rich Nolan's letter again. And, you know, I mean, morally and proper planning it's very compelling what he says. And I don't know, I'm kind of torn. I'll see what the rest of the board wants to do. But I mean, if you have any thoughts, I know that there's a balance here where you don't want to piss off the Center Square Association, but you know, they've jumped through all the hoops, and you know, the real factor is that we have a very compelling need for that kind of requirement. So, I don't know. Yeah. 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 Okay, well, we better get on it, but I just wanted to kind of let you know. Okay, let's see it. Bye. Okay. Okay, we have one more person. We have Chris yet to go. Zach, I'll give the rules of procedure, then you could talk about how everybody can speak. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Zach, since all of these presentations we've seen before, I'm going to say that the applicant has 6 minutes instead of 10 to present because they've already presented.
I would just recommend making that a vote. There were two things, two items that were added. I think based on the discussion from the workshop, which would be 11 Anderson Drive and the 76. So maybe during the time to potentially move 11 Anderson Drive to the consent agenda, it might be a good time to just do a similar vote just to change the rules for this meeting.
Okay. Well, I still have to give the rules of procedure in the beginning.
Right.
So I should do that anyway. I mean, before the consent agenda, no?
Yeah, I think it would just make sense to have that go as a vote for the whole board. That's all.
Okay. Still waiting for Chris. Well, I think we'll get started anyway. We might as well go through the rules of procedure while we're waiting for Chris, okay? So if you want to get everybody going, let me know when to start, please.
Oh, you just want me to go over how to sign up for public comment?
Yeah, let's do that after I do the rules of procedure, okay?
Okay.
So tell me when we're ready.
Chris is here, so I think we're all set. We have all the board members.
Hey,
So
Chris. Hey, Chris.
Good evening. A lot going on my way. Sorry for being a couple minutes late.
That's okay. Hope it's not bad stuff.
We have a new head of my organization, and when that happens, you know, everything is topsy-turvy.
Yep. Let me know.
you're all set to go, Al.
Good evening. This is a public meeting of the Albany City Planning Board for Tuesday, August 25th. My name is Al DeSalvo. I'm chair of the board, and we have all of our board members here today, including Roman Kuchera, Martin Hull, Lenisa Gayard, and Christopher Ellis. Also joining us is Deputy Planning Director, Assistant Planning Director, I'm sorry, and Principal Planner Zach Powell. And joining us soon will be the Planning Director Bradley Glass, and we also have our Corporation Counsel here, Amy Levine. I will state the rules of procedure and then ask the board to vote on them. And then we'll move into the first item on the agenda, which is on a consent agenda item. The rules of procedure that we are proposing tonight is that slight change, and only a slight one, and that is that because all of the applicants have presented before, sometimes on numerous occasions, we are going to limit the applicant to 6 minutes presentation instead of 10. Then there will be questions to the applicant by the planning board. And then after that, testimony by the public, which will be 3 minutes. 6 minutes though for corporation council members who may want to speak as they represent the larger area. After that, we will listen to recommendations by the professional planning staff and then give any clarifications by the applicants, 4 minutes. And then finally, we will vote on the item on the agenda. If that is acceptable to the board, may I have a motion to accept those rules of procedure for this evening?
So moved.
So moved by Glenace Guillard. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Hall.
Any other discussion about this? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Nobody. It passes. Thank you. Zach Powell will now indicate how the public can present and what you will see on your screen when you're presenting. I would just suggest that the public, which each of you has 3 minutes, to make your testimony succinct. And if someone before you has indicated something that you agree with, just say I agree or disagree. That gives you more chance to state other parts or concerns that you have about the particular issue or project. Zach?
Hi there. And just to clarify, I'm just a senior planner. I'm thankfully part of a staff with a really great principal planner and deputy director as well. But just wanted to make sure that they weren't forgotten in the mix. So some people have signed up to speak already tonight. If you haven't already signed up to speak, or you maybe want to sign up to speak on additional cases, feel free to use the chat feature within Zoom to send a message saying that you'd like to sign up. We would just need your name, your address, and then the case that you want to speak on. If you're calling in via phone, you can also feel free to email me at zpowell@albanyny.gov. I'll try to keep a look at that throughout the meeting. So in case someone wants to sign up that way as well. When it is your turn to speak, if you are a member of the public, you'll get 3 minutes. We'll have a visual timer on the screen. It'll make an audible beep when there's 1 minute left, and there will be 3 beeps when your time is up. For common council members, since they represent their wards, they get 6 minutes. And similarly, we'll have a timer on the screen with 3 beeps at the end as well. And if you have any questions about how to sign up or the format of the meeting, again, feel free to use the chat feature. I will be operating the meeting, but I will try to be looking at the chat as much as possible as we go throughout the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Zach. The first item on the agenda is on a proposed consent agenda, and that is 11 Anderson Drive. This is a project that we have seen twice before at public meetings as well as the workshops. The applicant has met pretty much all of the items, and I would like to ask the board to agree to consent agenda on this item. Is there consensus for consent agenda for 11 Anderson Drive?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then I will proceed to the 2 items that we must pass on the consent agenda. The first one is a recommended action of the State Environmental Quality Act. We have a negative declaration. May I hear a motion to approve the seeker?
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. And the recommended action is to approve of the project with this condition, and that condition is that the applicant must apply pavement markings using epoxy type liquid paint on Anderson Drive to delineate on-street parking and driving lanes. This was a recommendation by the staff, and I believe that that's been definitely agreed to by the applicant. So I would ask for approval with that condition. Do I have a motion to approve with that condition?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. It passes. We will now move into the public hearing agenda. And the rest of the meeting is a public hearing. And the first item on the public hearing agenda is the proposal for the Stewart Shop in a mixed-use neighborhood centered zoning district. The request is for conditional use permit for the construction of an approximately 4,000 square foot structure and accompanying canopy in accommodation of a vehicle fueling station and convenience retail use. This project has been before the board almost the last three meetings. It's April, May, and June, as well as the workshops. Okay. Do we have representatives here to present? And again, remember that you have 6 minutes.
So Tyler, I promoted you to a panelist. I'm not sure if anyone's joining you to present as well.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
My name's Tyler Fronte here from Stewart's Shops tonight to discuss our proposal at Colvin and Washington. As mentioned, we've been in front of the board a few times now. This property is zoned MUNC in the mixed use neighborhood center, which allows our use that we're proposing today. The addresses involved are 2A and 2 rear Colvin Avenue, as well as 1057 and 1061 Washington Avenue. That being said, since I have 6 minutes tonight, I wanted to go back to the board to see what questions they had directly that they wanted to answer. I can go through the steps of the conditional use review standards, but I want to make sure that I'm addressing the questions appropriately for the board.
Well, before we do that, I think we should probably proceed to the, excuse me, I'm gonna get my notes. Yeah, we could proceed with questions by the board. So I will open up the meeting to the board for questions concerning the development.
See, have there been any changes since we last saw the proposal?
So the building is still positioned at the corner of Colvin and Washington there. What we did do is we heard back from the city traffic department. The interconnect between our parcel and 10 Colvin will be eliminated per city traffic request. Additionally, we added some more larger buffer, more screening in between the Rosemont Street neighbors, the residential houses that abut the property here in the MUNZ zoning district. So we staggered our trees to add a larger screening and buffer area.
Okay, thank you. Do you have an updated plan to show us, or?
Yes, I do. I submitted, that's on the PowerPoint.
Is it okay?
That shows, keep going, Zach. Up, one more up. So that's the additional, go back to the landscaping. Thank you. So as you can see on the northwest side, furthest over, we staggered the trees. So there's a 6-foot vinyl fence there, along with staggered plantings. The curb cut still shows the interconnect to 8 Colvin Avenue to the north side of the property, but we just found that out yesterday and haven't made changes to the plans yet.
Okay. I have a question. Any change to the egress and ingress along Washington Ave, or is that still a two-way entrance or exit as well?
According to traffic department at the city, it is, the curb cuts are as is today, and they will remain that way. We offered to install, since it's a signalized intersection in the proximity of the curb cuts to the intersection and sight distance, the city department, as well as our traffic engineer, said the sight distance and the proximity to the station or to the signal allowed a large enough of a buffer, so the access points were fine. It is a signalized intersection, and we are contributing. There's a software platform called MyoVision that can control the light based on any given traffic condition.
So you anticipate vehicles heading bound on Washington Ave to make a left into the shop on that off of Washington Ave without going to the light, correct?
There's potential. I mean, some people could go to the light and take Colvin, and some people can come right off of Washington Avenue. And again, this is a directive from the city, traffic engineer.
Okay.
Hi, Tyler, this is Chris. Can you walk me and / us through the methodology you all use for site selection?
Yes. So in terms of site selection, we identify parcels at corner locations, preferably at signalized intersections that are zoned appropriately. That's typically what we look for. So we like to be close to the neighbors. We like to be, at the signal as well. So again, we promote this building here is positioned up against the street. There's pedestrian improvements so people can walk from the neighborhood, because we are, our use is typically, we're high pass by trip generation. So people don't make original trips to our sites. It's more the local residents. Additionally, what we look for, again, the biggest thing is the zoning of the parcel. So that's what gravitated us towards different sites.
So you feel that the existing MUNC district is appropriate then for this particular development, although it does indicate that the commercial use is non-destination and non-order oriented? How do you reconcile that?
That is correct. After meeting with the city staff and discussing, that's what we, our use is allowed here. And the key word is primary and predominantly. So again, we see ourselves, everyone's saying that we're just a gas station. That's what the opposition, that's what they keep referencing. We're a convenience store. Gas is just one thing we offer. We offer locally sourced products, ice cream, dairy, eggs, our food to go items. So we're more than just a typical gas station. That's why square footage of our footprint is larger than what someone would call a service station.
But you would not build a store in your new plans, your new corporate plans that doesn't include gasoline.
At this point, this development, we came forward with gas.
Further questions?
Yeah, sorry, I'll
Yeah, that's okay.
interested a little bit in expounding upon the changes in the industry. I guess for this conversation, it should be convenience versus gas depot. Just looking for a little more context in how Stewart's estimates the industry has changed and will change going forward.
Yeah, so great question. Standard C stores are, tobacco, beverage, and that's it. That's and lotto. Those are those three main phases of a gas station. We're more of a convenience store. So, we have our frozen items, we have our food to go items, and that's, again, the reason for the larger footprint is to accommodate the food to go. So we have fresh subs, sandwiches, eggwiches, our dairy key, our frozen small scale, grocery items. So we offer a variety of different products.
Further questions?
And again, the reason for the larger footprint and the change in being more of a market is people are living a busier lifestyle. So they're constantly on the go. So this allows them to go in, fuel up, grab what they need, get the energy they need, and head back to wherever they may be heading.
All right, Tyler, just another question. You said for people to drive up, get what they need, fuel up, and then head out. So it does sound like it's an auto-related service. What do you anticipate percentage sales from walk-ins, like for the neighborhood, and what percentage for folks driving through to get gas and the few convenience items? Have you done analysis of that?
So when I meant fueled up, I meant the body as well as gas.
Right.
That being said, we are 65% passed by traffic. I do not have specific numbers in terms of walk up versus not right now.
Okay. Al, I have a concern regarding the requirements to meet this the special conditional use. I don't know if maybe that should be directed more toward the planning department.
Yeah, go ahead.
Zach, can you pull up the letter from your department expanding on the how the property met the 7 requirements?
Yeah, I can go to the text from Commissioner Spencer's letter.
Yeah.
Which particular standard were you looking to discuss?
Number 3, and then the one of the auto-related use. I forget which one that is.
Probably D. Yeah, so from Commissioner Spencer's letter, this is talking about just with any project that would go through major development plan review or through certain triggers, applicants are required to reduce stormwater runoff, which stewards would be required to do since they would be exceeding the threshold, which really in the USDO, anything, any modification that's visible from the street is eligible to be reviewed by the Department of Water and Water Supply for their comments and any required modifications to the site. So this is kind of speaking to that. And then also that the proposed assessment would increase for the property based on the documents that the applicant had provided. So this would be showing that there would be an increase to the tax base for the city as well as the county. So these are showing that, by making the site have an active use and make improvements to the site through stormwater improvements as well as landscaping and an increase to the tax base. This is how the letter is describing that it's meeting that standard.
Okay.
The one problem I had with that, I mentioned this to the board too, is that it isn't our purview to deal with tax base. I don't know why the commissioner put that in the letter.
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes with conditional use permits, they sometimes they do get into issues where it's a little bit of whether this is planning related or not. I mean, the applicant did submit evidence showing that there would be an impact, I believe, only on 3 properties in terms of a decrease to the property value of neighboring properties. So it's kind of interconnected with that of showing how that's going to impact adjacent properties fiscally, but also kind of looking at whether the increase to the tax base would kind of counteract the negative impact to the decrease in value for neighboring properties. So, I mean, these are things that the planning board, also can weigh as well, and whether they determine it's a significant piece of evidence in order to make their determination for the conditional use permit.
And Zach, also go to item 4, which I guess would be D.
Yep.
And my main concern here was the character of the neighborhood, because I have no problem with the presentation from the planning department in regards to Colvin Ave. I agree with it completely. And if the proposed development was located strictly on 2 Colvin, 2A, 2 rear, no problem. But as it extends along Washington Avenue, I have a problem with it meeting the being consistent with the character of that neighborhood. And that's where I was tying in with section 3 as well about the fiscal impacts on adjoining properties. I understand there is only one competitor directly across the street, but they're also located in the corner of Colvin and Washington. However, their footprint is not as large as what's proposed here. I guess what's bothering me, if there was more of a something that blends more into the character of the neighborhood for this proposed site along Washington Avenue, that would alleviate my concerns. But as of right now, I have a real problem with section 3 and 4, mainly number 4, with meeting the character of the neighborhood. Can you address that for me?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this letter is generally just talking about the overall intent of the zoning district, which is, again, to provide a mix of uses that support residential. I mean, this is kind of a transitional area, especially with the proposed site being located on a corner. There are just going to be issues just in terms of character and how that transitions. Especially from Washington being primarily residential to Colvin being primarily commercial. So it is a balancing act trying to figure out what's going to be appropriate not only for the district, but also just kind of the character of each street frontage as well. So I mean, I think when you're reviewing this, just I think it's good to parse out what elements of this can't be resolved through site plan review. So, I mean, that would just be my guidance of just whether this is going to be a significant enough issue that impacts just the conditional use permit solely, because that's the only application on the agenda tonight. So I would just keep that in mind. And if it's not something that you think can be resolved by the, or you think it is something that can be resolved by the current design, that might be something to push for more if the application continues further through development plan review.
Because I do think that is something that could be addressed through a revision of the site plan, something so that when you're going down Washington Avenue, it doesn't jump out at you, other than at the corner, which is where I think it's appropriate.
Right.
I don't know if the rest of the board has similar thoughts.
Yes, definitely. I think you're right. I think the scale of the parking lot is very large relative to the other buildings, but really both on Washington and on Colvin. I mean, Washington is all single-family houses on relatively small lots. And then to hit this would be a big change to the character. I had a question or a follow-up question on number 3. At one point there was an issue or a potential issue, a question about whether or not having fuel storage tanks next to single-family residents would create a problem for those homeowners when they tried to resell their houses. Has that been resolved?
Sorry about that. So the applicant provided a little bit of clarification on that, and that was solely for above ground tanks, not below ground tanks. And so above ground tanks impact HUD insured mortgages, whereas below ground tanks do not. So that's been clarified a little bit. I mean, I think, again, it's, to the board's discretion whether they need more information just on, underground tanks to begin with, or if that's enough of a concern related to this specific review criteria. But for that, the impact on HUD insured mortgages wouldn't apply in this scenario.
Okay.
I think there is the potential also problems of various gas and oil spills on the site itself because of when there's a delivery, when the gas fumes come up, when the cars, when they're filling up and they drop gasoline on the floor. So, I mean, there is the other environmental piece of that goes beyond above ground tanks or below ground tanks.
Yeah, I mean, there are potential emergencies and kind of worst case scenarios that could happen with a lot of different uses. I think it's probably better to direct, either the conversation or the decision making based on just what's going to happen with daily use. What are going to be the daily impacts as a result of this use? If it's something where there is, a spill, that's incumbent upon the applicant to clean that up. As well as create a plan to prevent that from happening again. But again, thinking about the things like, idling or turning, light noise, kind of the daily things that, really can't be resolved through kind of a emergency mitigation plan are good to think about when reviewing this.
I wanted to go back to the item that was brought up by both Martin and Roman regarding the image of the street. And I think that, the predominant image of that area is definitely Washington Avenue. And in fact, there is predominantly residential and offices from Ontario Street all the way west to the western edge of the Harriman campus. It's either residential, office, or institutional. And there's no real break in that except for that one gasoline station across the street. The image of that area, I think, is definitely the Washington Avenue face, not the Colvin Avenue face.
Sorry, Al, is there something specific related to kind of the break in that you wanted me to speak about, or just were you wanting to just kind of voice that and have that be a discussion?
No, I was just agreeing with the other two board members.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
I think to me,
Okay.
this a lot of what we're talking about goes back to the purpose of the zoning district being to encourage a variety of non-auto-oriented retail and commercial uses. And this, to me, somehow, this really does come out as an auto-oriented use because it's very, it's got a large parking lot and there'll be a lot of traffic coming and going for refueling and that sort of thing.
Other comments?
Chris, yeah, I'd be interested in hearing from either the applicant or the planning staff on our thoughts regarding the alignment to the strategic plan of the city of this type of development in this neighborhood.
So I mean, I can speak. I mean, kind of from Albany 2030, it was envisioned that Colvin Avenue was going to become more of a main street. So I mean, I think with this being a new development, there's opportunities to kind of snowball and have more new developments come along Colvin Avenue. I mean, again, we're seeing this with 60 Colvin Avenue as well as a few conversion projects of office buildings nearby as well. So we are starting to see a little bit more activity along there. So, I mean, it does have the potential to increase future development along there and make that more of a feature, a main street for Colvin Avenue. You know, and I think it's been brought up many times that, you know, the image of the entrance of Colvin Avenue from Washington Avenue is really important, especially since there is an existing gas station with parking in the front, making sure that the image and the visual characteristics of, you know, those corners really makes it possible for that to become a main street and not just continue as a commercial area with, you know, kind of limited usage. Or I think that's kind of the image that it's portraying. So I think, you know, again, it's balancing those concerns going through this. I would say, kind of again to the question that Roman had earlier, I would just, when you're looking at this, just trying to separate out what's specific to the site versus the use itself, and really thinking about, especially for this with the conditional use permit, you know, how does the specific use meet those standards or make sense for that location / zoning district?
Any other comments, questions?
Zach, so just so I understand this correctly, if I have a problem with item 3, you know, of the 7 items in order to approve a conditional use, and you're saying though that could be addressed through site review?
No. What I'm saying is just, you know, when you're making this personal decision, I would just say, think about it, since, you know, the conditional use permit is the only application for this project on tonight's agenda. So I would just say, when you're voting on the conditional use permit, I would think more related to the specific use of the site as a gas station and a convenience store. Whereas, you know, if the conditional use permit gets approved, there are things that can be looked at for the development plan review to change aspects of the site. But again, you know, I think as we were I think Al had mentioned with the tanks, you know, there are certain things that are can be resolved, but there are certain things that just, you know, inherently with a gas station are just going to be kind of daily changes. So thinking about how that interacts with adjacent properties and the zoning district, I think that's kind of where the direction of the conversation should be going for this. And sometimes it is hard to separate, but I think it's good to think of it kind of in a separate sphere.
I have a hard time separating item 3 from the conditional use permit. I don't think it satisfies it from my perspective.
And that's totally your opinion too. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just my guidance, you know, for all of these review standards, is just when you're thinking about a particular issue or topic with the application, just thinking, you know, is this something that can be fixed through site plan review, or is this something that's just going to inherently be something that needs to be discussed or alleviated as being a gas station and convenience store?
If I could also just add in, various elements of the different criteria do call into question, whether or not there is specific evidence in the record that would support it. So, in addition to making it just your opinion on many of these things, this would be just your opinion based on the substantial evidence in the record. There are certain criteria, the character of the neighborhood, which are a little bit more subjective than others. But to the extent that any of these criteria relate to, something like the gas tanks or, a specific impacts like that can be measured, if you think that we need more information about that, that's certainly something that can be pursued.
Thank you, Amy. Shall we move on, or are there still further questions? Okay. We will now take testimony from the public. And Zach, you can start. And also, thank you very much, Zach. I think you made excellent points and gave us some good guidance.
As did all of you and Amy. So thank you for the active discussion. Give me just 1 second. I'm just going to check the chat before I start moving into taking public comment. And I'm just going to switch over to the timer. So just bear with me 1 second.
While Zach is doing that, again, I'll remind the public that you have 3 minutes, and so we don't go too late into the night. If you have points that other people have mentioned, just say that you agree or disagree.
Can everyone see the timer? Can everyone
switch to the screen share?
Oh, it says that I am screen. Is it showing it now?
I'm talking to the public. I've got to switch to screen share in order to see it.
But is everyone able to see the timer now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Ms. Harrigan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good evening, Chairperson DeSalvo and board members. My name is Margaret Harrigan. I reside at 160 Rosemont Street and have done so for more than 4 decades. I did listen to you, Chairperson. I'm going to limit my remarks to the USDO because others are going to touch on traffic and other things. And I appreciate the board's thoughtful questions and looking at the larger picture. I oppose approval of the application on the grounds that it violates at least 2 of the 8 purposes of the city's USDO. The Unified, as all of you know far better than I, the Unified Sustainable Development Ordinance in its purposes talks about protecting and preserving the city's residential neighborhoods and promoting the public health, safety, and general welfare. This project would significantly alter the appearance of the neighborhood along Washington Avenue and possibly endanger public safety in the interests of increased revenue for the city. My understanding as a citizen is the USDO is a balance. Over the past 4 decades, I've watched my neighborhood ebb and flow. It's now a balance of ages, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic groups, and relatively safe from traffic. A recently new neighbor 3 months into the block between Washington and Lincoln, unaware of the proposed project, recently explained to me that he had moved from the street near the Montessori school to this particular street because of its safety, and he was unaware of the proposed project because of the safety it represented. His child was in danger of traffic from the drive-by Dunkin' Donuts. This outlook is shared by many of the residents, especially those with young children. The project should be denied. The city revenue possibly gained by the establishment of this gas station and convenience store will certainly be offset or eclipsed by the decline in neighborhood property values and the departure of young and old from streets such as Rosemont, where the balance of economic development and protection and safety of residential neighborhoods would be slanted toward economic development at any price. Sustainable development should not sacrifice residential neighborhoods to gas pumps. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Mr. Lamar, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Hi there. I'm Paul Lamar. I live with my husband at 143 Rosemont Street. The acquisitive and predatory nature of Stewart's is nowhere more obvious than in the company's application to build a hypermart at the corner of Colvin and Avenues. In their rather blithe explanation on the conditional use application, they state, "This development will fill a void in services for the surrounding community." The application should have been rejected right there because, as we have said repeatedly, there is no dearth of services in the neighborhood that Stewart's wants to overwhelm. The corporation has for some reason identified the Colvin Avenue corridor as a place for a hypermart. Apparently the corner of Colvin and Central Avenues do not fit the bill, so that leaves our corner, or does it? There are plenty of other stretches of roadway that are not a neighborhood whose character will be compromised by traffic, noise, and light pollution, gas leaks, and most notably fires at gas station. Let me return to the word predatory. I didn't use it idly. As far as I know, the 2 apartment buildings and garage on Washington were not for sale. The owners were, I assume, approached with a sweet financial deal. Who could look away? Maybe the owner of one of them, County Legislator Gary Demolowitz, should have looked away because the tearing down of perfectly viable structures that provide affordable housing is the last thing the city of Albany needs. Speaking of those 2 structures, Councilman Mike O'Brien told an Upper Washington Avenue Neighborhood Association gathering last Friday that the Common Council a couple of years ago had failed to observe the fact that these buildings were included in the mixed-use rezoning when they shouldn't have been, nor was there a 6-month review period when that action was taken. We wouldn't be here today if they had picked up on that detail. Is it too late to do anything about it? We trust not. Stewart's purports to be a community partner. Baloney. There was no vision in building a huge gas station dribbling out gallons of carbon fuels from pumps on an overpaved plot of land that, in concert with the destruction of a full stand of trees, pretends that there is no threat to the environment or to climate. This is regressive development at its most obvious, and its presence here is deplorable. The world is going forward, Stewart's is going backwards. What about the Stewart's brand? Is there something inherently special about it? Stewart's thinks so. In that case, I suggest those customers visit one of 12 Stewart's shops within 5 miles of our house. 12. Wherever you're coming from, you're bound to run into Stewart's. I'm speaking passionately tonight because this project affects the quality of life of 3 neighbors especially, but an entire area of the city that will feel the project's destructive presence. As one member of the community said months ago at a neighborhood meeting, when is enough enough? I think it's now. And the planning board has the right and the opportunity to help shape the proper development of growth in Albany. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next.
Sorry about that, just trying to shift. Hyde, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yep. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. This is Hyde Clark. I'm president of the Upper Washington Avenue Neighborhood Association, and I live at 39 Van Buren Street. First, just want to thank the planning board for asking the questions and looking at the conditional use permit standards. As Tyler said, it is permitted, but it is only permitted on a conditional basis. So I think it's important that the board is looking at all those standards. I have submitted a letter previously. Neighborhood's still very concerned with the full access, turning left onto Washington Avenue, turning left from Colvin into the proposed gas station. Did hear a comment that Colvin Ave is envisioned as Albany's main street. And I guess my concern is, does Main Street really need a third gas station when we're trying to be livable, walkable neighborhood and get away from greenhouse gas emissions? I think if this was just a storage shop and we were just taking down the vacant key bank, I think there would be a lot more support from the entire neighborhood. I, for one, would love to see something being utilized on the corner of Washington and Colvin instead of a vacant building. But, the more I look at this and, listen to neighbors and listen to concerns, I think the demolition of the key bank and the existing residential structures just goes a bit too far. And I feel like there's never really been any concessions from the applicant in terms of size of this proposal, and therefore just doesn't seem to fit. So other comment, it goes back to the zoning district. There's an existing residential structure next to the existing gas station. Somehow that's zoned R1M, residential district. I think it was a miss by the Common Council to zone those two residential structures in the commercial district. I know the planning board can't look at that in terms of whether or not this is permitted as a conditional use permit standard, but I think it does go to the character of the neighborhood and, again, those conditional use permit standards. So that's my concerns for tonight. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Are there other speakers?
Yep. Just as a heads up, we have 5 more speakers, so I'm just gonna again keep pulling from the list. Sarah, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sarah Harrington. I reside at 141 Rosemont, which is on the corner of Rosemont and Washington, facing Washington. I, along with my neighbors on Rosemont, have submitted written comments, and the board and the public comments have touched on a lot. So I just want to highlight a couple of points. Earlier, Tyler stated on 2 occasions that the neighborhood center allows their use. And this has been the entitled tone of stewards throughout this process, but a gas station is permitted in a neighborhood center only on a conditional basis. I spoke at the April meeting about why this project does not meet the 4th criteria for conditional use, largely because it's an auto-centric use that is really encroaching on the residential neighborhood, so I will not repeat those points again. The board has also raised similar points in a letter to the applicant, but the applicant has not modified its plans in response to these concerns. Earlier, Zach mentioned that some things could be fixed through site plan review, but the applicant had this opportunity to fix these things and did nothing but add a few trees. And if the site plan review requires fixing things in order to meet the conditional use criteria, it doesn't meet the criteria. I do also want to respond to Tyler's emphasis about the words primary and predominantly in the description of the non-destination and non-auto-oriented commercial uses in a neighborhood center. That same subdivision of the USDO provides that the commercial uses should be small in scale without qualification that it be predominantly so. And the proposed development is not small, at least not at this corner, given the surrounding neighborhood and other commercial uses in the vicinity. In fact, earlier Tyler used the phrases larger footprint and bigger market to describe the proposal. Further, the neighborhood center is a new designation for the Colvin Ave corridor. It was previously zoned as a commercial office zone. So in transitioning to resemble the neighborhood center designation, it would seem more appropriate to encourage the primary and predominant uses contemplated by the USDO. And the Albany 2030 plan describes this sort of area as highly walkable with nodes of activity with things like community serving retail, parks, neighborhood schools, and libraries. This vision does not include a large gas station. While Stewart's likes to emphasize its retail component, its proposal has 8 gas pumps, 24 parking spaces, and 35-foot curb cuts. And both the parking spaces and the curb cuts violate the specific use standards for gas stations in the USDO. Not only is the proposed plan autocentric, it runs counter to the goal of a walkable neighborhood, given the increased hazards to pedestrians that will arise from the increased traffic, maneuvering cars, and oversized curb cuts. So we have elaborated on a lot of these points in our written comments. So I just request that the board deny the proposed development, and I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harrigan.
I think it's Scott, even though it says Raymond, but I could be wrong. Are you there?
Yes, I am. It is Raymond.
Okay, perfect.
I live on Melrose Avenue, and I will admit I'm not as impacted by my neighbors on Rosemont. And I am speaking, first I want to thank the members of the planning board for all the work you do on behalf of the citizens of Albany and making sure that projects are properly vetted. I'm speaking in support of Stewart's this evening. I know that others are more impacted, but I believe they have a positive impact on the communities they're in. They've been demonstrable as good corporate citizens in the capital region for many years through their charitable works. They maintain their properties, and looking at the sightlines of the property from Washington Avenue, it looks, and from the corner of Colvin, it looks much nicer than the property across the street. And they provide walkable options for Staples. But I also understand the concerns of the neighbors on Rosemont, and perhaps maybe there could be a compromise in the design that would alleviate their concerns. Thank you very much.
All righty. Thank you.
Ian, are you there?
I am. This is Ian Benjamin, 134 Jefferson.
Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
For this proposal at this stage, I really have two items that I think it would be good for Stewart's to consider as potential concessions moving forward. The first would be, I would like Stewart's to consider expanding the footprint of what they're referring to as a convenience store, such that it better represents a store with more and greater options for fresh food and other products, with an eye toward that which they have provided recently in Port Henry. Simultaneously, they may consider reducing the number of gas pumps from 8 to 6, and perhaps considering inclusion of hybrid or electric car plug-in stations at this location. The second concession that I think that they should consider pertains to 1061 and 1057 Washington Avenue. Given the proximity of those two buildings to the site, I do understand why Stewart's is seeking to demolish those, because they're looking for a larger space in which to construct their building, as well as additional parking, etc. However, we do have a need here to maintain our historic housing stock in the city. And also, I have concerns about the destruction of these buildings, which due to their embodied carbon. As such, I think that they may consider moving 1057 Washington Avenue such that it is closer to 1061 and thereby gain something like 10 to 15 feet, if not more, to their intended lot. This would be in line with what they have done previously on Hoosick Street, Hoosick and 10th in Troy, where they moved a row house to make way for an expanded convenience store. Thank you. Those are my comments for tonight.
Thank you very much.
Shamalia, are you there?
Yes, hi Zach, I'm here.
Okay, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Hello everyone, my name is Shamaila Qureshi and I'm the co-owner of 1029 Washington Ave gas station. And we are merely 53 feet away from the proposed site. And I do agree with all my fellow speakers, especially Lamar and Sarah. They have said more than enough that I had planned to say, but I would like to agree with some of the points, add some of the points to them. First of all, I'm really disappointed with the presentation points of the Stewart's representative. And I really, as a background in psychology, I did not feel any empathy for our neighbor and the whole neighborhood character. They think that they are entitled to the zoning, so they can do anything. And then there's another speaker that was in support of Stewart's. They think that it's just a convenience store who has a lot of charitable contributions to the community. While we are not looking here any charitable contributions, we believe in hard work. And so we agree that we are not a very glitz kind of a gas station, but we are a hardworking people. And my husband and I built this gas station little by little with little bit things. And we believe in hard work and preserving this neighborhood. Instead of tearing down the buildings, we are preserving them. So we do not agree that tearing the buildings and changing the neighborhood character would do anything good to our neighborhood. Also, Stewart's is totally ignoring the hardship and the current problems of our neighborhood, which is extensively said in this meeting, and it has been said in other meetings too. And I do not think that they are bringing anything new to our community. They are talking about fresh food. So if you are in the neighborhood, you see that we have everything what Stewart's carry, all the dairy and the gas and everything. We are bringing the fresh food, and if you're in the neighborhood, you'll see we have already a banner up in there. So there's nothing. And if you're already in the neighborhood, you know Hannaford has the best food and fresh fruits. So we are not missing anything here. My Rosemont fellow members will be greatly impacted. The other day I was standing on the grounds of that 2 Colwyn, and I was really disappointed that I will never be able to live in the street where the gas station is hovering on my head. And also, they are not solving any problem. I think they are adding to the many problems that we already have. So I don't think so they care about anything. They just care about their business, and they don't care about the emotions and the safety of other people. If they do care about building communities, I would say they should go to the communities those really need them. They need jobs, and who needs a fresh daily food, those who lack. So I request the planning board, please deny the application. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Hello?
Councilmember O'Brien, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Give me just
Okay. I commend the board for asking excellent questions tonight, which unfortunately I don't think were adequately answered. I absolutely agree with the public comments of Margaret Harrigan, Paul Lamar, Hyde Clark, Sarah Harrington, and Jamali. I did want to make a couple of points. Number one, on the traffic issue and allowing left-hand turns in and out onto Washington Avenue. I cannot imagine any kind of a software program that's going to be added to the intersection traffic lights that in any way is going to help that situation. It's a recipe for an accident. I also wanted to comment on the boundary lines. I was involved with the adoption of the USDO, and I have lived my whole life in this neighborhood, so I'm familiar with Calvin Avenue. And I do know that when we were looking at that block of Calvin Avenue as being commercial office, and we decided to rezone it as mixed-use neighborhood center, it was an assumption, and I guess council didn't do all of its homework, that the mapping of that new mixed-use neighborhood center district would actually just follow where the offices were when it was commercial office. But in fact, it followed the backyard boundaries of all the houses on Rosemont Street, including Paul Lamar's house and his two neighbors. That should be and probably would have been corrected with a 6-month review to correct oversights to the USDO. It should still be corrected. A couple of other points I want to make. My understanding of mixed-use neighborhood center is it is designed to serve a neighborhood. And that neighborhood, which is 2 blocks long blocks, but 2 blocks long, already has a gas station on each block. So there is not a neighborhood need, as some of the speakers have said, for Stewart's to be a gas station. Perhaps the Stewart's wanted to be a convenience store. There would be probably more of a demonstrated need for that, but certainly not a gas station. And really, it is the gas station part of it which is consuming and destroying and would seek to demolish the 2 existing residences on Washington Avenue, which quite frankly have been there for as long as I can remember. And as many speakers have said, are an integral part of the sitescape of Washington Avenue as you drive up and down it in that area. So this would radically alter that. So I would, as many of the speakers have said, I would urge you to deny the application. And I think your questions were excellent. I do not really see that they were answered. And I won't use up all my time. I'll just simply close by saying, please deny it. I don't think it's good for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Zach, are there recommendations by the staff?
Yeah, so again, we were starting to go through this, and the staff recommendations are the memo that the planning board received. So I'll leave it to the board if they want to go through these again, or if there's only specific pieces that they'd like to discuss. So
I think that the board has seen the memo and has pretty much reviewed everything as far as I know. Is any further questions that the board would want to ask concerning any of these items for the conditional use?
Yeah,
If
Zach.
not, okay.
Al, I had something, just so I understand the process. If the conditional use permit, because you mentioned about, the actual changes to the site plan as opposed to the conditional use. If approval is obtained for the conditional use permit, what's the next step that the applicant has to go through?
yeah, so the applicant, if the conditional use permit is approved, then they would still have to get demolition review approval as well as development plan review approval. So there's the demolition of the two residential structures at 1057 and 1061 Washington Avenue, as well as a garage that I believe is located on 2 rear Colvin Avenue as well. And then just more globally, the development plan review for the site as well.
Would they also not need a zoning change, zoning approvals for a couple of changes?
No, they wouldn't need a zoning change.
Not a zoning change, but
they would
I
need
thought
to
that-
consolidate the lots.
Okay, but they would need BZA approval for that and for the size of the ingress and egress, no?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So they would need a variance approval for the permitted driveway widths, because they currently exceed what's permitted under the use specific standards for vehicle fueling stations. So really the first step would be they would go back to the BZA. The BZA would make a determination on the variances. They would either get approved or denied from that. Based on that, they would either be able to continue with the proposed driveway widths or would have to modify the design in order to meet those standards. You know, if they still want to proceed, then they would go through demolition review approval as well as development plan review approval at the same time, because that's traditionally how we review applications together, because a lot of the review standards for demolition review are tied in with development plan review standards.
And Zach, both of those items would go in front of the planning board, correct?
Yep.
Okay, the applicant, any clarifications that you would like to make? You would have 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to make a couple comments here. First, in regards to the tanks, the city doesn't regulate the tanks and location and whatnot. So I just want to put that out there. In terms of value, everything is done on appraised value for given properties. So it would be an appraiser who would value, establish a value for a property. Secondly, when we first came and met with the planning department, we had the buildings flipped. So we had the building back off the corner and the gas at the corner of Colvin. The building was up against where 1057, 1061 was, giving the building as a buffer to the residential. After reviewing the code closer and with discussion with the planning staff, it was decided that, you know, internally, that there would be a ton of variances needed. And in order to make it more code compliant and fit what the USDO is trying to obtain in the MUNC zoning district, we selected this option, putting the building up against the road, creating that streetscape image along Colvin and Washington Avenue. Secondly, in regards to the memorandum that was submitted by the chief commissioner, Mr. Spencer, I just, for the record, wanted to make sure everyone was aware of his recommendations. I can read through the first part of it. I won't go through everything in the review standards, but I just want everyone to be aware of that if they haven't seen that memo yet. So this says the staff memorandum and recommendations for the proposal for the redevelopment of 2 Colvin Ave have been prepared in accordance with section 375-5D5 of the USDO of the city of Albany. The redevelopment of 2 Colvin Avenue as proposed is consistent with the purpose and intent of the USDO and the Albany City Code, and in particular meets the review standards necessary for a conditional use permit. As noted in the USDO, conditional uses are those used that have been potentially unforeseen impacts or unique form and require a careful case-by-case review of their location, design, configuration, and impact to determine against fixed standards the desirability of permitting their establishment on any particular site. I'll read one more sentence and then I'll stop. The planning board's review should consider how the proposed use is consistent with the review standards for the particular site rather than whether the particular use should be permitted within a particular zoning district. So I'll let that, that was a letter submitted by Chris Spencer, Commissioner. The last thing that I believe someone from the public raised was, and maybe one of the board members did, was in regards to the structures and historic. None of these properties are on the National Registry. We had an outside consultant review, and we have SHPO sign off that these properties are not historic of any value. And again, our proposal is an allowed use in the NC zoning district.
Thank you, Tyler. I think a key element in the commissioner's letter was a careful and comprehensive review or language similar to that of the conditional use standards. After all the discussion and the meetings that we've had on this, I get a sense of the board that the board would deny this conditional use. So accordingly, I as chairman would move to deny the conditional use application to allow the Stewart shop. And if you would, please bear with me, because I want to go for the record point by point so that it's clear as to why the board may vote for denial. So I would say that the planning board moves to deny the conditional use application for the specific project at the addresses noted upon the following findings made pursuant to the USDO. And again, please bear with me. I'll try to read these fairly quickly, but again, I think we need to have this on the record. First, consistent provision, the review standard number one, the proposed application would not be consistent with the provisions of the USDO. Specifically, the application is for an auto-oriented use and therefore is not consistent with 375 2D 2B, which states that, quote, the purpose of the MUNC district is to provide for a mixture of residential options, local retail, and small-scale commercial uses, providing support services to the surrounding residential neighborhoods. Primary land uses include a variety of predominantly non-destination and non-auto-oriented retail and commercial establishments, as well as complementary residential uses. Second, conditional use number two, the proposed application would result in a random pattern of development with little relationship to the existing development. Specifically, the proposed application would introduce a commercial use facing Washington Avenue, which would be inconsistent with the existing pattern of development that's along Washington Avenue, which is primarily residential and institutional between Ontario Street and the western edge of the Harriman State Office campus, with the exception of the one gasoline station at 1029 Washington Avenue, which it itself is a non-conforming use. And this was brought up by a few people in discussion by the board members. Third, the proposed application would cause negative fiscal and environmental impacts on adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhood. Specifically, the addition of a vehicle fueling station will have negative impacts on property values of the owners of residential properties immediately across and adjacent on Washington Avenue and Rosemont Street. The proposed application will also cause several negative environmental impacts, including these. First, heavy auto traffic in and out of a vehicle fueling station that will create a danger to pedestrians and bicyclists and create an increased likelihood of vehicle collisions. And I note that there are on the record a number of vehicle collisions at both Colvin and Washington and Brevator and Washington. I believe at least 34 in a 2-year period that we looked at in previous meetings. B, heavy auto traffic in and out of a vehicle fueling station and idling vehicles will increase air pollution in the immediate area. And I would say, aside, the Stewart's representative may indicate that that's not the case because they tell people not to idle, but I have a neighborhood Stewart's shop very close to my house without gas pumps, and yet the people park, go in, and keep their cars idling. C, heavy auto traffic in and out of a vehicle fueling station and the storage, delivery, and sale of gasoline products will create the potential for petroleum spills and other automotive-related environmental contaminants. D, the demolition and replacement of 2 residential buildings, accessory garages, and the former Key Bank building will have a negative environmental impact through the creation of demolition debris that's unlikely to be reused. And E, the demolition of 2 residential buildings will have a negative environmental impact through the loss of affordable housing. Standard number 4, the proposed application would be inconsistent with the purposes and objectives of the MUNC zone district and with the character of the neighborhood for the same reasons that I stated above in findings 1 and 2. The proposed application overall will serve primarily a commuting public and will not be in the interest of convenience to the neighborhood. 5, the proposed application would result in harmful cumulative effects of similar conditional uses because an existing non-conforming vehicle fueling station is located directly across the street at 1029 Washington Avenue. And 6, the proposed application will not provide a necessary and desirable service that is in the interest of public convenience because the neighborhood is already well served by fueling stations, including those located at 1029 Washington Avenue, which of course is directly across the street, at 64 Colvin Avenue, which is only 3/10 of a mile away, 812 Central Avenue, which is 7/10 of a mile away, and on on Washington Avenue, west of the site, near the Dunkin' Donuts, which is about 7/10 of a mile away. There's 4 fueling stations conveniently located in the neighborhood. The neighborhood is also well served with respect to convenience store services by the stores associated with those gasoline filling stations and by 2 supermarkets at 900 Central Avenue, which is 4/10 of a mile away, and 911, which is 6/10 of a mile away. So I put that forth as a motion. Do I have a second? I hear no second.
Al, I would limit it to just compliance with item number 4, being consistent with the character of the neighborhood, as well as, with the MUNC district as far as primarily non-destination and non-auto related. Those I feel are the main legitimate concerns. I understand everything else has a relevance, but I think that's the main points.
Well, I think they have relevance, and that's why I think that I went through this in detail and wrote these up because if you look at the requirements of a conditional use, each one of those I think is relevant to the development project as it's proposed.
Well, I agree with you, and I definitely I attempted to second, but my unmute would not work, so that's still applicable.
So there is a second by Martin Hall?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion.
I would just say, for all the board members, if there is something that you either agree with or disagree with on that or want to add, I think now is the time just to talk about that, just so that it's in the public record. And just so that the board can discuss this prior to the vote as well, just so it's again, all on the record, and there's consensus on the reasoning for the denial.
All right, well, again, I know Al went through every single item, and I understand there is legitimacy in most of the items, but there is some items which could raise questions. So I'm more inclined to be clear that I just see an issue with item number 4, being consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Again, not along Colvin Avenue, but along Washington Avenue, which could be addressed through approval of the site plan revisions. However, that is an issue for conditional use permit. And also, given the primarily non-destination, non-auto related establishments that's noted in the MUNC zoning district, for me, those are the 2 items which would cause me to determine that I would vote against getting a conditional use permit.
Can council clarify what steps the board needs to take when members agree on certain provisions of the conditional use standards not being fulfilled and not others? Does a member vote against the motion, or how does that work?
There are a few different ways that it can be done. You can go through each item and vote individually. In this case, I think it might be helpful to have written findings prepared and distributed to everyone, and then they can be ratified at the next meeting.
The last part of what you said, Amy, please have written, say that again.
If it's not clear that there's going to be a consensus as to the basis for the vote tonight, you guys can request more evidence and take more time, and you can have us prepare written findings and then rule in those specific written findings at the next meeting.
Amy, if could the board also take a vote on Al's motion as it stands, and if if it doesn't receive approval, the board could again revisit it at the next meeting, or is that a default denial if they don't have the limited votes?
Look that up if you give me a moment. I do think, considering that Roman has come out and said that he would only support it on item 4, I think that there's a question as to whether or not the board would want to vote for Al's proposal as it was set forward, or just the denial on the basis of character of the neighborhood. So I think we can treat that as a competing motion at this point. And let me look up the statute regarding rehearings at the planning board.
Chris or Glenisa, did you have any comments, questions?
As of right now, no.
Okay.
Nor do I.
Okay.
I'm assuming you're still looking something up, Amy?
Yes. Give me one.
Okay.
My understanding is that the planning board can't rehear an application in the same way that the zoning board can. For an application to come back to the planning board, it would need to have some actual change to it that the board would be looking at.
Okay, based on that, then we would need to vote tonight whether you want to vote on the entire thing or on just item conditional use number 4. It sounds like. Would that be correct?
I think you can also request if you need more evidence on any of the specific items.
What is the sense of the board? need to know what is the sense of the board. Glenessa? Chris? Martin?
Well,
This-
I-
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead,
I believe
Vanessa.
procedurally, we have a motion on the floor that's been properly seconded, so I don't know if it's improper to call for the vote, but
Can we
procedurally,
withdraw?
that's the next step.
Yeah. Can that be withdrawn while we ponder other alternatives? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the key issues that Al brings up, the character of the neighborhood, and I think Roman's mentioned them too, and the specific, I mean, the USDO talks about this as being a zone where, local resident serving businesses are allowed, and not auto-oriented businesses, except in unusual cases. And to me, that's fairly obvious that it doesn't meet that. This is a large gas station in a zone that's not meant to serve it, meant to accommodate it.
I would say, just to add on to Chris's point, it could be done also that Roman's suggestion is treated like an amendment to the proposed action. So you could start with a smaller set of standards and vote on that. And then if the board so chooses, move to a more expansive reasoning for the denial. But Amy, that might be, feel free to correct me if that's also improper.
Yeah, you can't have an amendment within the entire motion that is in the motion itself. An amendment would be something that would be different. I think that it's necessary to vote on this. If the board does not want to vote on the entire motion as I put forth, then we can move on to the possibility of moving one section of it.
I agree.
Amy, can you correct me if I'm wrong? I think procedurally, and to make this a little bit cleaner, is that Al revoke his motion, and then we move on whether or not we vote on accepting this application. And if we vote no, then we vote individually on each point that Al brought up.
I don't believe that you can move forward with the application that way, because
okay, that's what I want a clarification on. But I'm just trying to find a way to make this cleaner, because it sounds as though we have not a meeting of the minds regarding the reasoning as to if we decide to deny this motion. But I don't even know that we have, as a board, denied the motion at all. So that's, you know what I mean?
In this type of circumstance, I mean, I would suggest that the board may want to go ahead and vote on each of the points individually.
I think so. I agree. But I think we also need to figure out whether or not the board has a consensus on whether or not to accept this application. Because if we decide to accept the application, then that sort of makes the points in a reasoning sort of mute.
I'm not sure that I understand what you mean by accept the application.
So the way that I heard Al's motion is that it's based upon the assumption, that term in air quotes, that we as the board will be voting no on the application as a whole. So I didn't hear any call for a vote and hear from all the individual members of the board that that's actually the case. So that's where I think I'm having some clarification, wanting some clarification to make sure that we're all voting in unison on no, even though there may be some discrepancy or some disagreement around the reasoning why.
So you'd like to take a vote on the motion as a whole first, and then
right. That's
each of the items. That would be that's definitely the way that it's done in some cases.
Okay, and that's what I was my original proposal. So I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Well, I have a motion on the floor. I want to move forward on that motion. I have a second. So I would call for a vote on the motion as presented, with all of the items intact. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Stay.
Motion fails. 2 to 1. I believe
Okay.
that's a default denial.
That is a default denial. You,
All right. So the next item,
The board could revote at a future meeting. Is that correct, Amy, or do they have to
Well,
restart?
this was on the motion as a whole, so you can also, if the board would like to take up Roman's suggestion that he would deny it on the basis of neighborhood character, the board can continue to that.
Can we continue with that at this point?
Yes.
Okay, well then I make a motion to deny the request for a conditional use permit based on requirement number 4, that the proposed development is not consistent with the character of the neighborhood in relationship to Washington Avenue extension or Washington Avenue, and also not totally consistent with the MUNC district, which requires primarily non-destination and non-auto related establishments.
I'll read this and see if you agree to this, Roland, because it's a little more comprehensive. The proposed application would be inconsistent with the purposes and objectives of the MUNC zone district and with the character of the neighborhood, as you mentioned, for the same reasons stated above in findings 1 and 2. The proposed application overall will serve primarily a commuting public and will not be in the interest of convenience for the neighborhood.
Okay.
So that's actually 3 and 4, isn't it? Or C and D.
Al, the only thing I would just maybe clarify is just the findings 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I think what you're referencing are the first 2 review standards, and if that's
correct.
not what, so it might be helpful for the board to consider maybe removing that language or changing it, because I think that may give the impression that those findings are also being used as a justification, which it sounded like from Roman's initial motion that was not the case. But if I am incorrect in that, Roman, feel free to correct me.
Yeah, my concerns were simply the consistent with the character neighborhood. Is that 4 or 3? I don't have it in
That's
front of me.
4. Yeah.
Okay.
4.
Yeah, so condition requirement number 4, as well as the requirements of the zoning district to be primarily non-destination and non-auto related. So consistency there. Those would be my 2 items.
Yeah. Yeah, the only reason I mentioned it is it repeats items 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 have very similar language, so.
And when I'm not sure what you mean by items 1 and 2. Are you talking about the conditional requirements 1 and 2?
Conditional standards 1 and 2, yes.
Yeah.
Standard number 1 says, small scale commercial uses providing support services surrounding neighborhoods. Primary land use include a variety of non-destination and non-auto oriented retail and commercial establishments, as well as complementary residential uses. So we can, we can take that out if you would like.
No, the 1 is fine, but 2 is the environmental and fiscal, right?
No, number 2 says that the application would result in a random pattern of development with little relation to the existing development, and talks about the proposed application has a primarily a commercial use along Washington Avenue, which is the existing pattern of development, which I believe is amazing. You agreed.
That can you put 7 criteria up?
Yeah, give me just 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so this is review criteria A, which I think, and Al, I don't know if you're using a different numbering system than the conditional review standards. So
Just the criteria under USDA 375-5E 16E, I believe.
E or D? Because D is related to the purpose and objective of the zone district and character of the neighborhood, as well as the specific use standards.
C.
C?
16C. No, the whole list of them though.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, so this PowerPoint just had the original comments from Commissioner Spencer's memo, but
I'm not sure if I can share the screen.
oh yeah, feel free if you want to share the screen too. I can stop sharing right now.
The review standards are I, V, et cetera, et cetera. So when I'm saying 1, 2, 3, and 4, I'm just saying, you know, it's Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same thing.
Can you set me up for screen sharing?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I had to do that. You should be good now.
I mean, the commissioner's one, the numbering is incorrect because he's using letters.
Right.
There we go. So if you notice that I and II, number 1 and number 2 are very, very similar and a little more explanatory along with number 4.
See, Al, I interpret it as strictly item number 4 because consistent with the zoning district, which is the comment about, you know, how the MUNC is primarily for a non-destination and non-auto related. So I think there's a conflict there. And then also the second part, the character of the neighborhood. So that's why I was limiting myself to item number 4.
But item 2 would result in random pattern development with little relationship existing or planned development relates to that also. But I mean, I'll concede to it. If you just want to do 4, that's fine.
Yeah, because, you know,
I think it's too narrow, but I'll go with the desire of the board.
The requirements for a conditional use permit, by the way, I mean, the proposal has to meet all of these 7 criteria. So
right.
The extent that the board wants to rely on point 4, that can be a sufficient basis.
All right,
Did you say that can be or cannot?
It can. You only, the application has to meet all of the criteria to be approved.
Okay, so in other words, if it doesn't meet one of those, it can be turned down.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let me revise my motion or clarify my motion that I make a motion to deny the application based on the review standards for conditional use permit. Item number 4, consistency with the purpose and objectives of the zoning district and character of neighborhood in which is located. Mainly based upon the character of neighborhood along Washington Avenue, and also the requirement in the MUNC district regarding primarily non-destination and non-auto related establishments.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please. I'm going to go person by person, so it's very clear. Roman.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the motion.
Martin.
Yes, I'm in favor as well.
Chris.
I'm in this abstention.
Glenisa,
I'm gonna abstain.
and I vote yes. So the motion carries 3-2. The conditional use is denied.
To clarify, on provision 4 alone, it's denied? Is it meeting the other provisions, or we're just not speaking to those?
We're not speaking to those because it made it
Okay.
clear, Amy Levine made it clear that if it doesn't meet one of the 7, it can be adequately denied.
So I think, we'll take the discussion that happened here, and then, we can prepare a written decision based on that and have it circulated based on item number 4 here.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just wanted to do an explanation of my abstention,
do you want to have that in the record?
please.
Okay,
We hear a lot of proposals before the board. Some of them make immediate sense, while others may not. I would think from an applicant's perspective that it's critical that they tie in their plans to the strategic initiatives and desires of the city of Albany, so that we have the full context of what they're proposing. And I tried to provide said opportunity today in this meeting, and I feel that we fell short. While offhand, I'm not against gas stations. I believe that I did not have adequate information to make a firm decision on the matter placed before us tonight, based on really not knowing how it fit into the global plan that we have for the city of Albany. So I'd like to add that to the record. Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else would like to explain their vote? Okay, we will move on.
And I can just say, just to kind of add to that thought, Chris, if, going forward, you feel like you want more of a discussion or presentation from our department on, kind of any existing plans or upcoming plans in the area, feel free to reach out, and we'll try to make sure that that's as front and center as possible going forward.
Okay. We are going to move on. We're almost 2 hours on that project alone. So if we can, we'll now move, I'm sorry, this is public meeting, not a public hearing. We're moving to our public meeting, and the next project that we are going to look at is project 00345. And this is 244 State Street, also known as 60 South Swan. The applicant is Jason Singer of Nolan Engineering, and the request is for mixed use. The request is to convert a approximately 45,000 square foot office building into 61 dwelling units and a small cafe restaurant. This is in an MU-CU mixed use community urban. And there was an appearance by the applicant on June 22nd. Okay. Do we have the applicant available to make his or her presentation? You have 6 minutes.
So I just allowed Rich Nolan to speak. Rich, did you want me to promote Schneider to talk as well, or are you just presenting tonight?
We're not hearing.
Rich?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's a little hard to hear you. You might need to speak up or move closer to a mic.
Okay, how's this?
No.
It's getting a little bit better, but you're gonna need to get a little bit closer.
Huh, that worked okay last time. That's weird.
Well, we still can't hear you, Rich.
Okay.
That's better.
That's much better.
That's better? Okay. I didn't
Yeah.
do anything different, so maybe it's just the connection.
Did
You want
you
me to
want
start
Schnur? Did you want Schnur to be?
Yes, please.
Okay, give me just 1 second for that.
Thank you.
Okay, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, just testing to see if you still can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay, this is Rich Nolan from Nolan Engineering, live from Burton Hills. To the left, I have the architect on the project, Jason Singer, and the owner would be Shamir, which I understand we also have online. Just I want to start off with, was a little confused. It is our hope tonight that this does come to a vote. I know that's out of my control, but if there is any flexibility on your end, we would like this to come to a vote tonight, but we could talk to that later, I suppose. Since meeting you last, we have received approval from the Water and Sewer Department, the Fire Department. We provided our responses to the comments from the Traffic Department. We have not heard back from them. We don't know if we're approved, but we have provided them our responses. On July 23rd, we met at the 200 Henry Johnson with the Center Square Association. They had several comments and questions, which I will address soon now because they relate to the same questions and concerns that you'll no doubtly have, along with the public most likely. I'll start off by saying, since the last time we were here, there's minor drawing changes. There was 2 drawing changes, which we'll have in this updated presentation. One was we simply enlarged the sprinkler room. And then the more significant one is that we provided a trash collection room on every floor with bins. Yeah, thank you. Any of those sheets should be fine. There's a trash room with recycling bins and trash bins on every floor, which will be picked up by the caretaker. It could be a couple times a week, depending on the frequency or the load demand, taken to the street and then brought back into the building when they are empty. So you should never see trash on the street for a long period of time, and they'll be inside bins. That was one of the questions that the Center Square Association has, how we were handling the trash. So that addresses one of their questions. I'll address their other comments, which again, I believe you'll have the same questions and concerns. I'm going to start with the easy ones and work up to the more challenging ones. One of their questions was if the proper building permits would be obtained. Of course, that's a yes.
Can I interrupt just a second? Zach, is there a possibility what we're seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, is the site plan superimposed over the first slide, and I can't expand it to look, so it's very tiny. Am I locked somehow, or can we be able to expand that so we could see better? Usually,
Did that help?
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll sorry. I use only part of the screen, so I have other windows open to help assist, but hopefully that'll be a little bit clearer.
Yeah, because now I could hold my fingers on it and then look more closely.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so the owner is aware that building demolition permits need to be pulled, building permits need to be pulled, regular site inspections during constructions need to be made, and a CO will have to be obtained at the end. So yes, building permits will be applied for and obtained. Another question was, would a building supervisor or caretaker live on site? The answer to that is no. There is a caretaker that lives at another building close by 20 Park Street, which the owner also owns. Since he's already living there, he has the capability of managing both buildings. So he will be close by, but not actually living on site, but very reachable and a short distance away. Another question was, what would be the construction hours and time to construct? Construction hours would be just usual construction hours. We don't have anything set in stone, but we're not anticipating any night work or unusual times that would disturb anybody. Most all of the construction is inside. There's very little changes to the outside. The only changes on the outside is we're putting in a safety crosswalk and modifying the sidewalk to be ADA compliant. The time to construct is estimated to be between 12 and 18 months. Now moving on to some of the more challenging questions, of course, is parking. So I just want to remind everybody of the obvious. We have an existing building that's 4 stories. It's already there. In my experience, there's really only 2 uses for a 4-story building. It's an office building or an apartment building. I'm sure you could think of some other uses, but realistically, those are the 2 uses that are most commonly used. If this were to be an office building, fitted up for an office building, it could potentially have up to 400 occupants based on the square footage. Even if you took a third of that, you'd be looking at 133 occupants. We're proposing 61 apartments in here, and we're not expecting all of the tenants to even own vehicles. We're expecting most of the vehicles to be college students, government workers, lobbyists, where they're going to rely a lot on public transportation. Additionally, though, the owner has partnered up with the owner of One Commerce Plaza, and he has 300 spots available, and he's willing to let the tenants park in. Of course, we wouldn't be anywhere near that. We'd also expect everyone to live there year round. Being students, they may go back home. Government workers, lobbyists may not even live there year round, but they'll maintain the apartment for a year. So just in summary, of course, parking is always a challenge, but the office space, in my opinion, would have more of a parking demand. We do not expect everybody to have a car, and we do have the availability of a 300 parking lot spot on One Commerce Street.
So we're at 6 minutes now.
So
I would
one
just
more issue to address if we can spare me the time.
I was just going to ask the board if they wanted to extend by a certain length of time, or if they just wanted to go into questions.
What's the board's?
I'm fine with another minute or 2.
Is that all right with the rest of the board?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not hearing anything. Okay, let's go.
Thank you. So the last issue is density. There's 61 one-bedroom units. I want to address that. The whole building is not full of apartments. Yes, most of it is, but there is about a third of the space on the first floor that has a cafe, a gym, a workspace. Also, we could have designed these as studio apartments and even fit more in there, but they're not. They're 1 bedroom. But there's been pushback to get 2 bedrooms or even 3 bedrooms. But I don't really see that helping the density, because if you have a 2-bedroom apartment, you're going to have 2 occupants. You have a 3-bedroom apartment, you're going to have 3 occupants. You're going to end up with roughly the same number of people, but it's going to be less financially viable for the owner, because he's going to get less money for 2 and 3 bedrooms apartments, and that's going to take the space of the 1-bedroom apartments. And I'm just in the interest of time, I'm just going to end with that. And let me know if you have any questions, please.
Questions by the board?
I think the first one would be on parking. When is that parking available? Is it just during certain times of day or days of the week or that sort of thing? And what happens to the cars at other times if it is?
I will answer that, and then Shamir, if you want to chime in if I say anything wrong. I believe the other spot is an office building, so I believe his parking spots at One Commerce would be taken up during the day, but then available at night. But Shamir, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Hi, everybody. This is Schneier here. Yeah, it's approximately 300 spaces. We haven't discussed exact details because the project is, again, we don't even have approvals for it yet. But we do feel that there will be significant spaces due to the fact that we're residential and they are commercial. So most of our tenants will be parking there after work hours and on weekends. whereas their tenants mainly will be parking during work hours. We have a similar arrangement with the Albany Convention Center, parking over at 20 Park Street. Also at 20 Park Street, we have about 23 spots, I think, and an additional 17 spots for 73 units. So we have about, and we don't use all 17 spots at the Albany Convention Center. So we have about 50% of our tenants with cars. We are expecting a lot less of our tenants at this space to have cars, since it's one bedrooms. Generally speaking, a one bedroom tenant base, you know, as a smaller percentage of them have cars as opposed to the 2-bedroom tenant base.
So over at Park Street, you actually have parking spaces available at the convention center in the evenings or overnight that you wound up not using.
Correct. We had an arrangement with the neighboring building, 150 State Street. They were 100, but we were able.
He's fading.
I know he's in the Rocky Mountains on vacation right now. He told me that might be part of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question related to that.
Not because they were no longer availability issues directly. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you've faded away, Schnur.
Okay, I have a question related to that, probably addressed to Zach or Amy. If we move forward to this project, realizing that there was no requirement for parking in this particular zone district and location, but the developer has indicated that it would have an agreement with the Twin Towers parking garage. Could we make that part of an agreement if we move forward? Can we put that as a condition?
I'll look into that and get back to you.
I'm missing you, Amy.
I mean, my initial thought is you probably could. You know, I think there would need to be a justification with that and a little bit more specifics on terms of what the planning board wants to see in that agreement, especially since the board's bringing up issues related to times of day that people can park, the number of spots. So yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, as Amy mentioned, something we need to look into, but I think it's something with a reasoning and a justification that could be placed as a condition.
I would caution the board, though, against placing a condition to require something that's not required by code. That said, I would fully support the agreement, and I think it's the right thing to do in the context of this project. So I agree with Amy that I think we need to explore that more from a legal perspective and from a precedent perspective. Just my 2 cents.
Thanks. Okay. Other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, we'll open it up for testimony from the public.
All right, so just give me 1 second. I'm going to be transitioning out of this, and then I'm just going to be getting the speakers list. So please bear with me. Michelle, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thanks for giving me the time. I live across the street at 64 Chestnut Street. and I submitted a letter, but so I won't go over all of that. I just wanted to reiterate that the density is inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. I think everyone has made that point so far. This is an extremely historic block and a historic street. About the parking, I think it's great that they have a plan set up, but the point I'm making is that, you know, from experience here parking myself, you're going to park as close to your house or apartment as you can. And then only after you can't find one, you're gonna go a block away. Even if someone's paying extra, I still think that they're gonna try to find a spot right here on Chestnut Street or C Street. The trash is already a huge problem on this end of the block I can speak to. I am constantly on See Click Fix, asking them to pick up couches, mattresses, mattress covers, all right here on Lower Chestnut Street. So adding that many more apartments with people, and I know that they have the inside trash, which I think is great now, but I am a little worried that there's not going to be a caretaker on the premises. We have 71 Chestnut Street across the street from us, and they, you know, they started off with good intentions. They had a caretaker on premises, and things were okay. And then new management took over, and then they decided that they probably, I'm guessing, could make more money by renting that apartment out instead of having a caretaker. And there's nobody there to look after things anymore. So now there's trash on the front of that building, and so also the noise, not just from the construction, but I mean, I noticed that there's going to be AC rooftop units, which would be just above the line of my top floor where my bedroom is. So in addition to all the density and people moving in, that additional noise can be a concern. That's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Michael, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you, Zach, for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Mike Giltonen. I have resided at 257 State for the past 27 years, just up the street from this proposed development. As a planning and design professional for the past 35 years, I object to this proposed reuse of this former commercial building, particularly into a very high density commercial development. And my concerns are as follows. I agree with Michelle on all of her points. Number one, the very high density for residential use for this location. Number two, I agree with Michelle. Parking is exceedingly difficult, and it has been made better in the past few years with resident parking. However, with 61 units, with potentially 122 cars, you know, that is a real issue for me and for the Center Square community. Number three, I do have a concern for ADA access. That is the American Disabilities Act. I do believe that having the front entry area down along South Swan is a serious issue for ADA, particularly when we don't have a rather good winters or even falls or even springs. And finally, I have an issue with the garbage collection. I concur with Michelle. The trash in the area collection has, I see an increased amount on Lower State Street. I commend the fact that they have, the developer has tried to address the garbage collection in the facility, but it's not sufficient enough. And certainly not with somebody there living in and constantly looking to see that it's done and cleaned is a concern for me. So those are my points. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay. So I'm going to be switching speakers. Eric Moses, I don't see you as an attendee on the list, but if you are here under another name, just please raise your hand. But I am going to move on to Jackie Ring, Jackie, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Sure. I'm Jackie Ring. I'm president of Center Square Association. I live across the street from the project at 66 Chestnut Street. This afternoon, the planning board was sent Center Square Association's letter of objection to the project in its present form. I'm hoping members have had an opportunity to read it because it provides the rationale for our opposition. In the interest of time tonight, I will only talk about issues by topic, assuming the board will take into account the reasons behind our concerns. In essence, this plan is not a fit in a neighborhood that has spent decades reducing density by restoring historic properties and townhouses into 1- and 2-family residences from high-density multi-unit rentals. We don't object to apartments per se, but a conversion that includes studio 1- and 2-bedroom units, reducing the total density, would be compatible with Center Square's character and goals. Simply put, don't cram 61 tiny units into a scant 45,000 square foot in a non-commercial neighborhood. The owner's desire to maximize profit must not negatively impact this unique neighborhood. Trash, it seems, has been dealt with. But when on parking, what we want to see is a written agreement between the developer and the garage at One Commerce Plaza that the tenants at 244 State will be able to occupy spaces there 24 hours a day. Parking needs to be both day and night. And even if only 50% of the tenants have cars, there aren't enough street parking spaces for 30 more cars. Finally, it's our understanding that while some of the city approvals have gone through, that there is still testing to be done by the water department until they can do a final sign off. I guess what we're asking is that some of these details be nailed down before the board approves the application. Until we can get some of these issues resolved, we are extremely concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ring. Do we have any other speakers?
Sorry about that. I haven't seen anything from someone else who signed up, so I believe that is it. Oh, someone raised their hand. Sorry about that. Give me just 1 second. Chris, are you there?
I am.
Okay. Can you provide your name and address for the board?
Certainly. I thought I did this earlier. Christopher Burke. I live at 188 Lancaster Street. We still a go?
Yep, I got that. So feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I want to thank you all for your service to the city. I know it's not an easy job. We appreciate it very much. And I want to thank the applicants for their consideration of development in the city of Albany. But I do want to encourage the board to deny this application. I've lived in this neighborhood for 28 years. I've represented them in the Albany County Legislature. I've run the Lark Street Business Improvement District and have been very involved in a number of organizations locally. So I've seen a lot of projects come and go. I'm very concerned about the size of this project, 61 small 1-bedroom apartments being put into such a small building, how densely packed in they're going to be. I don't know why this project is any different than some of the others that we've seen. If you look at the work that Redburn Development has done throughout the city, Knox Street in Park South, which I was involved in, Albany Med, Tri-City Rentals, Western Avenue, Washington Avenue, Dove Street, Central Avenue, they've all had 1 and 2 or 3-bedroom apartments. They've worked closely with the city. We've seen these in the neighborhoods. We've seen input being taken seriously and considering the projects. I haven't seen that with this developer at all. And they're saying that market research is dictating these small one-bedroom apartments. I suggest that all these other projects I mentioned, their market research goes completely the opposite direction. That's not actually the fact. I would love to know, and I think the board should find out what firm was retained to do this market research and get a copy of that report, because everything points in the other direction as far as I'm concerned. This property owner has already been cited for improper windows, asbestos abatement, and an illegal dumpster, poor track record, and no consideration of the neighborhood. Everything that we've heard tonight or have seen in writing is all facing students and the legislature and gives no consideration to the neighborhood whatsoever. It simply does not fit, and the market data just doesn't exist. I don't think it supports it at all. So I'm very concerned about that. I'd love to see the board send these folks back and come forward with a project that really does fit with the neighborhood, shows some concern with the neighborhood, and something we can get excited about that's going to enhance the neighborhood. This project simply does not do that. And I also don't agree with the target market that they've suggested, professional students and government staff. We've seen government agencies move out and the state workforce decline over many years. You read the papers, we all know that that's the case. So I don't think it holds water whatsoever. This project really doesn't fit. And we'd like them to go back and come back with something that we can consider seriously. We know there's a need for density in the city, but we need to be smart about it. We need good projects. And the fact that there's no agreement in place for parking right now really doesn't hold water. You need to park 24/7. Everybody knows that. If people are going to walk to work, they're going to need parking during the day. So they're lobbyists. What are they going to do during the day? So that doesn't really hold water either. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I encourage the board to deny this application. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke.
We did get another speaker. Bear with me just 1 second. Christopher, are you there?
Yes, hi. Good evening.
Hi, can you state your address for us first?
Sure, yes, as stated earlier, my name is Chris Warner and my address is 317 State Street, just up the street from the proposed conversion. I'm also a member of the Center Square Association. I'm the treasurer, and I've lived in the general vicinity of the proposed conversion for about 20 years. So, I just want to talk about briefly why I'm very concerned about this project. Having lived in this neighborhood for many years, walked this neighborhood very regularly, and seeing that it is a 61 unit proposed conversion. So, just to state what, many of us already know, I think core to the Center Square neighborhood character is the promotion of quality of life issues. Talking about things like gardens and trees and greenery, historic architecture. In fact, the neighborhood is on the Register of Historic Places. This proposed conversion would be part of that National Register of Historic Places. There's annual traditions of historic house tours. There's a strong sense of community and neighborhood in the neighborhood. And there's an active neighborhood association. So, I mean, that's kind of the character of the neighborhood. There generally is not any or very few that I'm aware of 61 unit apartment buildings in this neighborhood, such as the one being proposed here. I'm not surprised it's being proposed. It's obviously has some desirable aspects and why people want to live here, but it would not be consistent with the character of the neighborhood, and in fact would probably be very concerning relative to the other quality of life measures which I've cited. And which have been cited here earlier, which primarily include parking, trash, higher residential turnover associated with high density housing, and other potential factors that would adversely affect quality of life, like the density of the housing here. So, and I think, if I had to try to state what brings us all together here is that we would probably all be encouraged by investment in Albany. But I would just want to be very clear in making a distinction between what I think is a financial investment, which happens to be in an Albany neighborhood, versus a community investment, which takes place in this neighborhood every day. They're both investments in Albany, but they're very different. And I think in this case, the way it's proposed, you have a clash of interests here. So, I would leave you with that important distinction: community investment versus financial investment. For the developer, I get it. There's a way to make money on housing, and that's it. But there's a lot more to that neighborhood than a financial investment at stake. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
No other speakers.
Okay. We have recommendations by the staff regarding the project.
Again, bear with me. Sorry, I'm just trying to share and get back to the PowerPoint.
Zach, can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, we've been working with the applicant in conjunction with the Center Square Association over the past month or so to try and get at some of the concerns that have been expressed. I personally have seen good points made by both sides, and I think the developer has done a lot in terms of meeting with everyone and be willing to have that discussion. However, I was a little bit discouraged, in follow-up to our prior meeting, which was at 20 Park Street, regarding a prior project that the same developers did, which I think everyone was pretty well impressed with the quality of the product there. However, not until today did we get some responses and follow-up to some of the questions that came up that were asked to be addressed. And frankly, I found some of them to be insufficient. So while I can't say the staff has a definitive opinion on this project at this point, I do think it might be premature for the board to vote. Despite the fact that, I know the applicant has stated a desire to have a vote, I don't know that, I think we should continue the dialogue we started and try and resolve some of these issues that are outstanding. So as far as we're concerned, our recommendation is deferral.
During the testimony by the applicant or maybe a member of the community, there was a question as to whether or not the issue concerning, I believe it's water and drainage, has been sufficiently vetted by the water department. Is that still outstanding?
No, the water department signed off on the project on July 28th. There was a letter or a memorandum sent prior to that, which we'd be happy to distribute, that raised some concerns that I think were communicated to some parties at the meeting tonight that were subsequently resolved. And that resolution was not necessarily communicated accurately. So I did speak with multiple persons at the water department today, the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and one of the engineers there. And they confirmed that the project had received the sign off for the stormwater, water, and sewer design.
Okay. I guess one of the things that I'm concerned about is, and I'm trying to balance this issue of density versus size of units. And I think the point was raised, and I don't disagree with this, that if you add bedrooms, you're going to add more people, which potentially means you're going to add more vehicles, which seems to be an overriding concern by the community. I know there's competing interests, but I'm not sure I understand that part of it. I think that people have to realize also, that 65% of all the units in Albany are renters, and 72% of everybody who lives in Albany are in 1 and 2 family households. There's only so the demand for larger apartments and is really not there. Mr. Burke brought up what other developers are doing, but the planning board has seen that the overriding predominant use of those developments, the highest percentage are 1-bedroom apartments. Every development in this city has predominantly 1-bedroom apartments. So I just put that out there. I mean, I'm not sure how we resolve this, you know, because I think that at least right now, unless I see anything to the contrary, to me, it seems like the developer is hitting an appropriate market for the location. Walk to downtown, many people don't own cars. There is plenty of employment. The people who would live there would likely walk to work. So, I mean, I'm not decided one way or the other, but I just put that out there for consideration. Are there other issues or questions by the board? Okay, hearing none.
Al, this is Chris, and kind of to augment what you said, when you start to read through some of our guiding documents, and you know, we have to consider, are we really trying to hit some of the goals and strategic objectives that we've outlined when we've gone through our processes? And it specifically says that, you know, you're trying to add density to the downtown area. And again, as a person that's been here for quite some time and lived the entirety of my my duration in the capital region in downtown Albany, and these are just the type of projects that we're going to consider. I think we've heard the consistent drumbeat from community members about this type of development. It usually revolves around parking. Having received many parking tickets in downtown Albany, I certainly can feel that pain, and having walked to my car from several blocks away when living in downtown Albany, I certainly can commiserate with that as well. So I think I just want to let community members know that we don't take our actions on this sort of thing lightly, but we are also charged with executing a global vision that is complex and not necessarily the most easiest to digest. So,
yeah, agreed. I hope you paid those tickets.
Unfortunately, I did. No boot for Mars.
Yeah, and I think sorry, this is Glenisa. I think I sort of echo both what you said, Al, as well as Chris, as well as try to add a little bit of how and seeing how this marries with the 2030 plan, and what we're trying to do, and how we develop Albany as we grow. So I'm not seeing a correlation with the number of 1-bedroom apartments meeting the goals of the 2030 plan, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, thank you.
This is Schneider. Can I have an opportunity to give some comment? I lost connection. I'm sorry. In the middle while I was talking.
Not yet, Schneider. We will get to you at the end. You can make some clarifications. I'm still asking whether the board members have any comments.
Thank you. Sorry for interjecting. I just lost service the last few minutes.
Yeah, we had a problem hearing you earlier. Any
Okay, I'll
other
wait.
items or questions the board has to the staff? Okay, we'll move on for clarifications, comments by the applicant. You have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm out in Colorado. Me and my wife went out for a few days on a vacation. Anyway, so I have bad service. But we have about the market research. We have 49 one-bedrooms and studios over at 20 Park Street. And we find that aside from being more financially viable for us to do the one-bedrooms, we find that there is a tremendous demand for one-bedroom and studio apartments. We have a much harder time filling up our two-bedroom apartments than we do with our one-bedrooms. As a matter of fact, we have a waiting list. Most of the people are single, and the one-bedroom apartments are cheaper. And for our two-bedroom apartments, we had to resort to creative ideas like roommates and so on. So, building off that, we do feel that we can fill the, there is a need for one-bedroom apartments, and we can kind of combine these two buildings, meaning if someone is looking for a two-bedroom apartment, we can put them in our other building. Regarding a clear agreement with parking with One Commerce Plaza, it's hard to come to a clear agreement at this time. Again, since the project is so far away, we have a very friendly and close relationship with the owners of that building. And I tried to get something in writing, and they did write something up, but it was hard to gauge, at our other building, which is 20 Park Street, where we have 73 active apartments. We're kind of always going up and down with parking. We had 5 spots and then 10 spots and sometimes back down to 5. Now we took up like 17 at the convention center, aside from our 23. So really, the parking demand is really based on need, on the demand for it. So it's hard to come to a concrete agreement of how many spaces and times, et cetera. If we do come to an agreement, when we come to an agreement with them, the parking is going to be a 24-hour parking spot. The idea of the fact that they're commercial and we're residential just gives us a stretch to how many spaces they can give us. Like let's say they have 5 available spaces during work hours, they would say they can give us 8 or whatever. I'm just throwing a number out there because they expect most of our tenants to be there during non-commercial hours when their tenants are using the space. That's what we've done at 20 Park Street with the neighboring office building. And regarding comments that were not addressed, I think there was some confusion. I know that Rich sent some things in earlier, and I apologize for not getting stuff in sooner. If we missed anything, it was just a misunderstanding, and that's it. I hope you'll, you'll view this project favorably.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation by the planning staff is to defer until I guess we get a little bit more clarification on getting a parking agreement as a potential condition. Is there anything else I would ask either Zach or Brad that should be considered by deferring?
I don't know if the excuse me, I'm eating. I don't know if the applicant has spoken to the affordable housing requirement pursuant to our code for 50-year units or more. We would need to either get that paperwork completed with the units and rents identified for 5% of those units on this project, or we would need to have that as a condition of any sort of approval of the project, that be formalized.
Brad, and those units, sorry, we didn't get through all this, but the units are identified on the plan.
Forgive me, Zach.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think for the board members, I think we just want to figure out, what are we trying to get from looking into a parking agreement? I think with some of this, since there's not a required amount of parking, I think we really need to think of tangible reasoning for, why we're asking for a specific number of parking spaces, not just something that sounds good, but just have a justification behind it. Or it's us asking, on behalf of the board for more information, about parking usage. Sharon was bringing that up a little bit throughout the meeting too, but I think we want to tie it to, some tangible piece of data or usage statistics for similar properties before making that request. But if you have any other questions or ideas on that, feel free to contact us.
I think that's a great idea, Zach. We desperately, I think, need to come up with some kind of database of parking usage in central part of Albany.
Just one more comment, if I may. I don't know if I finished, but we did supply some sort of letter from One Commerce Plaza. It just didn't specify how many spaces. They just said that they're in talks with us and they're very able and willing to rent us some spots. I think that was sent in a number of weeks ago. I don't know if that was presented. Again, I lost connection for a few minutes.
No, that's okay, Schnur. I think it's more just, from your experiences, you told us a little bit about, but also just more globally figuring out what, the parking usage statistics are for similar types of buildings, so that, when we're making a recommendation on behalf of the planning board or the planning board is making a recommendation or an ask for parking spots, that it's, justified by, some data on it, so that, you're going to One Commerce Plaza, with a little bit of evidence of why you're requesting, X number of spots.
Okay.
All right, so based on the recommendations of the planning staff, we will defer this until the next meeting. And we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is 60 Colvin Avenue. The applicant is to request a concept review of a major development plan, which is the construction of a 3-story, about 57,000 square foot mixed use structure with 48 dwelling units and about 4,900 square feet of retail space. We had seen this project on June 22nd. That planning board meeting, and we have also seen it at a couple of workshops. I appreciate all the people who are still on the public participants for having patience, because I know that we have one more item on the agenda after this one. So I want to move forward, and hopefully we can get through this fairly quickly as the time is getting late. So can we have the applicant up? The applicant has 6 minutes to present, since we have seen this project once before.
Sorry, I am looking through the list. Joe, are you representing the applicant?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Are you representing the applicant?
I can. I mean, I thought that somebody from Hirschberg may be speaking this evening. I don't know if they're still with us. I know Dan was unable to participate tonight. So I don't know if there's any, I can't see on my end, but can you see on your end if anybody from Hirschberg is signed up to speak?
Give me just 1 second. I'm going to change your role to a panelist. And Joe, I don't think anyone from Hirschberg is going to be attending. And I think for the board's benefit, and I think, Amy and or Brad can expand on this, but I think the primary goal was to discuss about, any potential additional testing on the site, and how the project relates to the Albany 2030 plan. So, I was not at the workshop. So, for the people who were part of that discussion, feel free to kind of direct as necessary, so that.
Sure, I can weigh in, Zach. I think there's a looming issue with respect to the sufficiency of the testing that's occurred based upon, the historical knowledge and the language in the comprehensive plan with respect to this being a potential brownfield site. Specifically, there was some contamination and is some contamination at an adjacent site that I guess had a similar historical use. So I think, we had to some degree utilized the prior workshop to try and get at what's expected of the applicant moving forward. The applicant does have a much longer list of comments from our office and from other city departments that I presume they're working through with their engineer and willing to, present to us their changes or sufficiency of meeting those requirements at a later date. So, I think if we could get to some clarity on how, where the board stands with respect to any additional reconnaissance with respect to any, materials that may prohibit or restrict the use of the site. That would be most helpful this evening, given that we still have another case on the agenda, and this application certainly will be back at a future date.
Okay. With that, any questions by the board?
I would just comment that I did go on the DEC site today, and the subject property is not identified within their database. The property behind it is, but if I remember correctly, his classification is N, which is non-active, or basically it's a site that may be contaminated, but it doesn't need any immediate action to be taken on it. Again, I can't remember exactly, but I do remember it was classified as an N. And I recall in our workshop that the applicant told us how they did have a environmental study completed on the property, and that the findings were below the minimum requirements for residential use for regarding DEC standards. So as such, they were not required to file that with DEC, since the subject property is not identified as a contaminated site according to the DEC. So I'm from my perspective, I think that the environmental issue is a non-issue at this point. Now, once they do excavation, and if they identify some contamination in the soil during the excavation, then it has to be addressed appropriately within DEC regulations and requirements. But other than that, I don't see where this should be any detriment to development of the site.
And my understanding is that the potential brownfield, and I would emphasize that it was potential, was identified on the upper right-hand part of the property, most of it being on the city land, but a little bit on the upper right-hand side of the proposed development site. But that's going to be where a parking lot will be, and not where any of the buildings are going to be.
Well, and I think it also needs to be clarified about the brownfield program. If you apply for funding through the brownfield program, you have to prove that there's some reason to have your property classified as a brownfield. But it's not out of line to apply for funding under the brownfield program without having your property already classified as such, and never be classified as such. So I just want to say, and again, according to EC site, the subject property is not identified as a contaminated site, which if it's a brownfield site under the EPA standard or federal, it should also be identified within the DEC site.
Okay. Other questions by the board? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to testimony by the public.
Bear with me. I'm just going to pull up the list.
How many speakers do we have?
Just two.
Okay.
I don't think he can.
Hyde, are you there?
Yep, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yep. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have brief comments tonight. Thank you to the board for listening. I know it's another late night for the planning board.
Is this Hyde Clark?
Yeah, sorry, I introduced myself.
Okay.
Hyde Clark, president of the Upper Washington.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't hear your name to begin with. Sorry.
Yep. So, my concern is just centered around kind of the walkability and ability to get to the park. And right now, the crosswalk across Colvin into the entrance of the park, it's very difficult for people to walk across that crosswalk. Cars don't tend to stop. So I was hoping as part of the planning process, the board may look to the applicant to make improvements in signage, which would allow, their tenants and also neighbors traveling into the park to make that cross section safely. The other question I would just ask the planning board to possibly consider is that we have an existing dog park that's very close to the applicant's property. It's not the nicest dog park. Just hoping that the applicant, the planning board may think about, possible improvements that could be made to the dog park as part of the application. I know this is still kind of relatively in the early stages, so I'll save additional comments for a later time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman O'Brien, are you there?
Yes.
All right, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay. I agree with what Hyde said. There's definitely walkability issues crossing Colvin Avenue. And I also agree with him that there are other issues which don't have to be addressed tonight necessarily, because as Brad just said a few minutes ago, there are still a lot of outstanding comments that the planning department and I believe the water department and that traffic may be submitting to the developer. I just wanted to note that the council did a resolution, and we were looking at the Clough Harbor reports that were done on behalf of the city between 2006 and 2008, which did indicate a lead infiltration area from 6 to the city-owned property identified as 60B and the privately owned property identified as 60. And that was, to my looking at it, in the mostly the center west portion of the 60 property. But there were some questions raised with regard whether you consider it merely a potential brownfield or a real brownfield. I know Brad attended a planning committee that the council had when it endorsed this resolution that we later sent to you, in which he was asked, well, does the planning department or does the code have any clear guidance? Because Brad said there are a number of places, Sheridan Hollow and the Warehouse District, where there are developers seeking to develop portions of areas identified in the 2030 plan as potential brownfield cleanup areas. And Brad said, no, not to his knowledge. And the consensus of the council is that, and we put it right in this resolution, that the planning department should propose a language for the USDO, which would set up clear procedures in the USDO for development in any parts of potential brownfield cleanup areas that are either already identified in the USDO or areas which may become so identified. To me, the logical conclusion from that is that the planning department and the planning board would consider those amendments, such amendments to the USDO, before they go further with any consideration of specifically 60 Colvin Avenue. And the other point which was made in this resolution was that the board, the department, should require a state environmental quality review that is that does what our council termed a hard look, which I assume would mean looking beyond just a negative declaration and a checklist from the developer. So I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of other issues. I think there are parking issues. I really think that the developer would have to grant a permanent easement to have spillover parking into his other properties like he offered to do. Well, he didn't offer to grant a permanent easement, but he offered to let them spill over parking. Because otherwise, I think a lot of your parking is going to wind up in Westland Hills Park, and that's going to deprive the users of the park, the parking for that was designed specifically for park purposes. So I won't take up my whole time. I'm just going to confine it to those remarks that I did make. And I'm sure that we'll be revisiting this in maybe more than one additional meeting as they respond to the various questions that have been put out by the water department, the planning department, and maybe put out by the traffic department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other speakers?
No other speakers.
Okay, we'll move on then to the planning staff recommendations in reference to 60 Colvin.
I mean, so really this was, you know, again, I was not around, but my understanding was this was more of just a check-in to see if the board had a strong inclination one way or the other of whether they wanted to see additional testing on the site. So I think really that's the purpose of this meeting, is just to provide clarification for the applicant. I think they have noted, you know, some difficulty with doing this, but are willing if they feel it is, if the board feels that it's necessary. So I think that's the primary purpose of tonight. And then just, you know, again, this will continue to be reviewed at, you know, additional meetings, and it's still being reviewed by departments. So there's no, you know, action that the board would really take other than just determining whether additional testing should take place.
I don't know that requires formal action, but, you know, we should probably, I mean, it would certainly be helpful for us and for the applicant to just clear the air on how, if we're moving forward on that subject or not.
My understanding is this correct, that the applicant is willing to make test borings where the potential brownfield site has been identified?
The portion on their property that has the potential to have need for testing, yes. I don't think they've made that request for the city-owned property, or they have not expressed that they would do that for the city-owned property, just to be clear.
But they would be willing to make test borings, a couple of test borings on the area where there is a little bit of a spillover as identified as a potential brownfield site by the 2030 plan?
Yes.
Al, I think we might want to pose that question to the applicant if he's here.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my sort of inclination from the prior workshop, that there was an openness, but there was a feeling that he was being asked to prove a negative, I believe was the way that it was stated.
Can the applicant give us a feeling, please?
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so Al, this is Joe Granich. I'm also here in my office with Tony DeThomas, who you guys are always also familiar with. We have had off-the-record discussions with members of planning staff regarding doing 2 or 3 borings in the areas that have been identified as potential spillover from the city of Albany owned plot. We've consented to doing that. We will endeavor to do that. I would just raise the issue that while Tony and I have walked the property recently, in comparison to the map that we provided to the planning board, we're going to have a machine in there to ultimately do those borings. The last time we were instructed to do some tree clearing on the property. We were met with a lot of resistance from the neighborhood. I would just let Mike know, I know he's listening, that if we are on site conducting the borings that are being requested of us, which we are willing to do voluntarily, that they be made aware of the fact that they are being done in the furtherance of what's being requested of us by the city of Albany. Secondly, if I can add, Hyde had mentioned the existence of the existing dog park and its lackluster nature. I will note that I think the board is aware that a portion of the dog park is on our property. We have indicated, I think, to Brad on more than one occasion that in furtherance of the project, it would be something that we would strongly consider in an effort to enhance the quality of the dog park. Whether we have to move the fence line, it remains to be seen. And then lastly, which was raised a moment ago, which and as many of you may know, I own several buildings on Colvin Avenue. I travel this road several times a day to and from work. And the intersection of Colvin across from the park that was referenced by Hyde is, I would agree, extremely dangerous. That section of road was just subject to a very large, and Brad, you probably know more about this than I do. I believe it was a large water department project that was just recently completed. The existence of whatever road markings existed have been paved over. There is no clear delineated crosswalk from what would be the east side to the west side of Colvin entering to the park. As far as future signage that goes along, we would be more than willing to discuss that. But right now, I think the issue at hand is the necessity to dig, as Al indicated, two or three pits in the areas that are identified. And we've indicated that we're willing to do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Can Tony just add something to that, please?
I just want to add one thing to the Hyde's comment about the dog park. And forgive me if I say his name wrong, but I'm not quite sure how Councilman, I think it's Hoey's proposal or resolution may affect, if that's even possible. I'm not really sure how that would affect our property.
That's probably a good follow-up item for us, Tony. I'd like to set up a meeting with you and Joe to go through some of the site details, and we can kind of identify those things that may fall into that waiver category and talk about what a potential resolution might be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Al, I did just want to add, I don't know, I don't see Amy still on the call, so unfortunately we don't have counsel, I don't think. Oh no, she's there. Sorry, you were off my screen. Should the board make some sort of a cursory vote with respect to clearance that may need to occur to allow the test pits, just so there's no consternation or confusion on that matter? Would that be improper? Does that need to be noticed? Or I'm just, I'd like to get it done tonight, I think, if that's the.
I don't know that there's a specific application. I'm also not sure that it qualifies under the clear cutting section. I took a look and I wasn't entirely sure that it would fall within that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess then we rely on everyone acting in good faith to obviously not clear more than is required and to do it in a way that's not overly disruptive and for the purpose of doing the borings.
And if that's the understanding with everyone that's involved this evening, I'm fine with that. We don't intend to cut down any trees, but there may be some foliage that is damaged obviously the process of trying to dig holes in the ground. The site is densely vegetated.
Could we ask the councilman if he's concurrent with that?
Sorry, what was that?
Could we ask the council representative for the district if he is concurrent with that, as I imagine may get communication from constituents on that matter and would be the immediate party to inform them?
Yeah, if they would let us know the date and, as you say, make it as least destructive as possible. The last time, a huge blanket of land, probably the majority of it, was cleared. But it sounds like this is a more concise area, smaller area. If you'd let us know the date, and I think Hyde is probably still on. He's the neighborhood association president, and he has an extensive email list, I know, and Zoom meetings with the neighborhood that we could get the word out as to when that is going to happen.
Yeah, and Haida just sent a message stating that he would share that as well.
Okay. And I understand that you would like a direction from the board that we would agree to and approve the test borings.
Yes.
Okay, so is it the sense of the board then that as we move with this project that we do agree on moving forward with some test borings on the property? Is that a consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
You don't hear anybody else?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move forward with that then.
Thank you.
Okay. And our final project is the 76 at 76 Central Avenue. This is a proposed major development plan review and demolition review. And the proposal is, as you all know, construction of a multi-building complex. We have had a prior appearance regarding zoning map amendments, which the planning board made a positive recommendation to the Albany Common Council. This, however, is now a review of the actual development plan and demolition review. And I appreciate all the participants who have waited and stayed this long. You are all troopers, as is the board. So hopefully we can move forward with this. And if you will, do we have applicants to present?
Here, we're still awake. But it's getting close to our bedtime, so we'll move quickly.
Yeah, you have 6 minutes, and please don't go over. The last times you've been presenting, you have gone over. So I'm going to ask you to really be concise.
Yep, no problem.
You'll move quickly and be concise, but there are a lot of items with respect to this project that we do need to work through. So we should think about potentially at the next workshop or something. I'll follow up with you, Al. You know, it's going to require further discussion. So.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Zach, and advance the slides, please. Keep going. As the chair said, the last time we were here for the zoning map amendment. We will be before the subcommittee of the Common Council on Thursday, and we're hoping a recommendation comes out of that meeting, which would set the Common Council up for a vote in September. And tonight we're here on demolition review and the beginning of the development plan review. Go ahead on the next slide. So we've got 4 properties or 4 slides to show you. All of these properties are deemed ineligible for listing on the historic registry. The first one is 4 and 12 Leonard Street. As you can see, the structure on the right-hand side is a 2-family residence. On the left is a garage. Go ahead to the next slide. 8 Leonard Street is a 2-family home that's vacant, as you can see, ineligible for listing on the historic registry, and it's got an assessed value of $15,000. Next slide. 6 and 8 Scott Street, 2 small structures located on Scott Street. One is a 1-family home. The second is a very small garage. Again, ineligible for listing on historic registry. And the next. The last one is 10 or 17 Crank Street. This is a 1-family residence, a fairly large structure, ineligible for listing on the historic registry, and it's got a value of about $50,000. Those are all of the properties that, that we have before you currently for the demolition review. As you may recall from our previous presentations, we're developing this project, which contains four major structures in 2 phases. Buildings B, C, and D are shown on the left with building A on the right. Building A is the one along 2nd Avenue, and that will be built as part of phase 2 We're still kind of hoping that we'll acquire the two properties along 2nd Street, and the design of that building is kind of awaiting our success or failure along those lines. Go ahead to the next. And this one just demonstrates the location of phase 2 and phase 1. So you can see there is a new kind of a new structures in between B and C that you may not have seen before. One, we decided to cover the aquaponics area so that we can utilize it year round. So it'll have a greenhouse, a 2-story structure, and right adjacent to it is an ancillary building that will have the parking, the bays for both the loading for the market as well as for the garbage. Go ahead to the next slide. And Kelsey will take it away from here.
So phase 1 includes 184 residential units. As you can see, this is the unit mix for those units. 60% again will be affordable. Next slide. And then in phase 1, the different uses that will be provided are listed here on the left, with the major uses being the grocery store, which will require a conditional use permit, in addition to a lot of service retail amenities for the neighborhood. Next slide. So really quickly with the dimensional standards, the two things that I just wanted to focus on are the maximum front setback. So as you know, this is a unique configuration where we have frontage for phase 1 on 3 different streets. Unfortunately, the topography does not work in our favor. And so in order to accomplish the buildings that we need, we would be orienting them to be parallel with the contours. And so with that, the narrow sides of the buildings will be on the frontage of Leonard and Crank for buildings B and C. And so with that, we're still working through potential modifications, but building C at this point has a 25-foot setback from the Crank Street side, which exceeds the maximum setback. And then for parking, sorry, really quick, parking with phase 1 after the reductions, we have 160 spaces required and we're providing 156, so we're only 4 short. Next slide. So for pedestrian circulation, as we've discussed, we will have full ADA accessibility through a main central corridor through the site, which will be accommodated through elevators and a central access point that goes through the buildings. And there are also additional pedestrian connections to the public sidewalks on each of the roadways. Next slide. For vehicle circulation, as we talked about last month, we modified the location so that all of the loading operations are in a central location on Leonard Street, and that will have a 20-foot wide garbage loading access with a single bay and 28-foot wide commercial loading access. And then all of the drive access points for the parking will be located on Crank Street at 2 different locations. Next slide. So for phase 1, these are the 2 different subsurface parking levels. We'll have 156 spaces total. The parking stalls, we've designed them as 9 foot by 18 feet to maximize the quantity and also reduce the amount of excavation for the subsurface parking. And they will have 24-foot drive aisles to meet the code. The driveways will be 20 foot wide, also in accordance with the USDA. And again, we're 4 spaces short, but we're confident that we'll be able to make up for that with the extensive transportation demand management plan for the project. Next slide.
So we've hit 6 minutes, so I'll just leave it to the board on where they want to go. If they want to extend time or just go to questions.
How much
We
more do
only
you
have
have?
2 more slides. Zach,
It's
is
all-
it 2 or 3?
It's
Okay.
already 9:10. Keep going.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that amenable to all the board?
Keep going,
I'm
Kelsey.
fine. I'm fine.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it, guys. We have a lot to cover. This is one major change that we haven't presented to you guys yet. So because of the scale of the project, and as well as concerns from the neighborhood and the charter school, and also recognizing that there's a lot of inconsistency in the existing road infrastructure around the property. We've developed a design for road improvements on Leonard, Seymour, and Crank Streets that will be included in phase 1 of the development. And we're actually going to be presenting these changes as part of the technical review meeting on Thursday to get feedback from the various departments. Next slide. So on Leonard Street, these images on the right are the existing views looking south at the northern and southern segments of Leonard Street. As you can see, the road is very inconsistent in design. The north is 26 foot wide with no real division between the road and sidewalks on each side and no protection for the utility poles and fire hydrants. So we're proposing to increase the width to 29.5 feet, replace the asphalt wing edge with granite curb on both sides to protect the utilities and the pedestrians. In addition, we'll replace the sidewalks on both sides and add parallel parking on the west side. Next slide.
And this is the last slide. Yes?
2 more. We just have Seymour and Crank to go through.
Okay, we understand you're going to be doing major improvements on the roads and the sidewalks.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on. Do we have any comments from the community?
No one has signed up to speak.
Okay, what are the recommendations of the planning staff?
Again, kind of as the applicants had mentioned, this was just kind of an opportunity to present phase 1 for the development plan review. Again, the applicants working to get through the common council process of rezoning the properties. So they were mainly doing this as just kind of an informative session since the zoning has not been approved yet. But again, just to get the board acquainted with the project, kind of similar to 60 Colvin Avenue. There will be things that the applicant will be working with departments on as they move forward with this, since the zoning was a little bit more just the planning department and the common council. This is now bringing in more departments, so this will probably be a more intensive process just for commenting, and just we'll learn more as we get more feedback from departments.
And is the planning department or the common council now coordinating the development of the demolition review and the major development plan review? I mean, who's doing the actual, the grindstone work here?
The common council is responsible for the rezoning of the property. The planning board is responsible for, I don't want to say everything else, but the conditional use permit to the extent that it's required, the any waivers that might be required, the development plan review and the demolition review.
Okay, so the planning department is coordinating all the other agencies and working towards that goal.
Yes, and I do need to advise the board, and I want to apologize to the applicant for my failure to communicate to the board that I did commit to giving them additional time this evening, just due to the fact that there are a lot of particular items that need to be worked through on this project. So I would ask the board to set aside at a future date additional time to give this project the due diligence and review that are required. Again, it is pretty significant. And again, as they stated, with the orientation of some of the buildings, there are some unique circumstances that are created. And just a failure to note before, the sale of Scott Street is also something that's going to need to be entertained by the common council. So I assume that process or that discussion will be starting soon, but that's another item that would be on the council's plate and not the planning board.
Well, yes, and given the complexity of this, I think we should look forward to seeing what other projects the planning board has on the agenda and how long they will take. And perhaps if the meetings continue to have fairly complex projects, perhaps we would have a separate meeting dedicated specifically to this project.
That would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, and depending on, of course, how, we may be lucky enough one of these days to actually have a shorter planning board meeting in which we can then entertain the entire project, and give it complete attention. Okay, any other comments by the planning staff or the planning board? Well, in that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Second. I thank you, and I thank all the participants who are still hanging in there, that you stayed this long. And I don't know if we were any better or worse than the Republican National Convention. Hopefully better. All right. Meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.